If you look at the Korean and European economy today, we have a kind of similar economic situation this year from macroeconomic point of view, particularly when we focus on business cycle. Both Korea and Europe have a low growth rate this year. Korea have a roughly 1.5% of growth rate this year, according to the forecasting of International Monetary Fund. This is the lowest growth rate over last 10 years, except the period of the COVID pandemic period. And Europe, particularly the Euro area, will have the less than 1% growth rate this year. Particularly, it's highly likely that Germany will have a mild economic recession. If you look at the reason for this kind of economic juncture, of course, the supply side shock is a major reason of this economic downturn. The Russian-Ukraine war has disrupted energy supply not only in Europe but in entire world, which increase energy prices, and that affect negatively private consumption and business investment both in Korea and Europe. And as we know, the Korea and Europe is heavily dependent on energy sources from outside, and if there is anything which disrupt the global energy market, actually it affects negatively both Korea and Europe. Export to key trading partner, particularly the country like China, have been adversely affected. The country like Korea and European countries, particularly Germany, are among the few OECD members who used to have a trade surplus vis-a-vis China. But when we look at the bilateral trade between Korea and China and Germany and China, actually there have been substantial decline over the last 2 years. Korea's export to China has been, actually Korea's trade balance with China used to be surplus, but Korea have a negative trade balance with China over more than 6 months up to June this year. And this kind of trend is actually attributed to China's extended lockdown measure in response to COVID-19 pandemic. But I think it's also related to declining growth rate of Chinese economies. I think this kind of trend is just a small part of changing dynamic of global trade that started even before pandemic period. The era of booming global trade has been slowing down toward so-called globalization. Trade conditions are becoming less favorable, and one of the main reasons is that there is a shift in supply chain and general slowdown in international trade. I think there are several combined reasons to explain this globalization trend, but I want to particularly focus on the economic security and resilience. Many countries, including United States, European country, and also the Korea, now recognizing the importance of economic security and resilience, particularly focused on a global supply chain. This has led to a kind of re-evaluation of conventional trade relationship based on the global value chain, and the country increasingly focus on securing essential industry and low commodity, even if it means sacrificing some degree of economic efficiency. Now, when we look at the economic relation between Korea and the European Union within context of global supply chain, I think bilateral trade between Korea and EU has in good shape. The European Union is one of the most important trade partners of Korea, and Korea is usually eighth or ninth most important trade partner of the European Union. More Korean companies participate in European production using global value chain, and also the European company also participate in Korean industrial landscape. In that sense, the trade, I mean the industrial structure between Europe and Korea increasingly intertwined over the last 10 years when we implemented Korea-EU free trade agreement.
As you may know, and has already been mentioned, the European Economic Security Strategy has been released in June of this year in a context of heightened geopolitical tensions, and there I'm mentioning notably the US-China trade tensions, a historical level of global economic interdependencies and risk of weaponization of trade relations, profound technological changes, and the paradigmatic shift of the global economy towards sustainability. It's also taking place in a context where countries all over the world, including South Korea and other like-minded countries, have started addressing challenges to the economic security. Now, the European Economic Security Strategy builds on prior EU initiatives and measures, and it is aimed at providing a comprehensive strategic approach with respect to economic security. And in this exercise, as mentioned, the EU is striking a delicate balance between openness cooperation, the traditional EU openness in trade and investment, and indeed greater protection. Now, the strategy of the EU builds on three priorities that actually are already reflected in and are further refined in the strategy, which is the concept, the overarching concept of open strategic autonomy, which is very much at the foundation of the EU trade policy review. So promotion, the first priority is promotion of the EU competitiveness, and there we are mentioning the resilience, the greater sustainability of the EU economy and supply chains. The strategy identifies some strategic areas, including semiconductors, but also net zero industries or critical raw materials. Then the second priority is the protection from commonly identified economic security risks, but also new risks linked to technology leakage. And then there is the third priority, and here we are speaking about partnering with the broadest possible range of countries who share the EU's concern and interest on economic security. And in the recent Granada Declaration, the Council of the EU has emphasized that it is now more important than ever to cooperate. Now, cooperation with South Korea should take place bilaterally, but also plurilaterally, and to the extent possible, but this is more difficult now as the chapeau is economic security, at the multilateral level, both are very strong advocates of the rules-based multilateral trading system. Now here I'm mentioning a bit what are the possibilities of cooperation between the EU and South Korea, what is already happening. The Critical Raw Materials Act has been proposed by the Commission beginning of this year. It includes benchmarks for this diversification, and as part of the Green Deal Industrial Plan, also proposed beginning of the year, the Commission proposes the establishment of a Critical Raw Materials Club that would bring together raw materials consumers and resource-rich countries. So there is a possibility, a window of opportunity for cooperation between both parties, and it could actually become complementary to other strategic international partnerships, such as the US-led Minerals Security Partnership, in which both the EU and South Korea are already involved. Now, the EU adopted also this year the CHIPS Act, aimed at addressing semiconductor shortages, and building on it, the recently launched digital partnership between the EU and South Korea is designed to foster collaboration on semiconductors. I'm now referring to three potential areas of collaboration with South Korea on these measures. Foreign industrial subsidies has been mentioned by the previous speaker. They are known to be heavily used, notably by China, and inter alia designed to create strategic dependencies. The EU adopted the FSR, the Foreign Subsidy Regulation, which entered into force beginning of this year. Now the EU, and this is quite remarkable, the EU-South Korea FTA in particular, cooperation agreement between both parties of 2009, contains relevant provisions on certain types of highly sensitive, distortive subsidies that are similar to those mentioned in the FSR. So both instruments could actually be the basis for discussions first, and then possibly negotiations in the future at the WTO to modernize the subsidy disciplines. Now, economic coercion, again, a restrictive measure. The EU and more broadly developed economies are increasingly subject to economic coercion. The EU is currently adopting the ACI, the anti-coercion instrument. The G7 has also recently in May launched a coordination platform on economic coercion, which is designed to increase the collective assessment, preparedness, deterrence and response to economic coercion. It's also aimed at promoting cooperation with partners beyond the G7, so including South Korea. But now, to the extent that this platform would provide for sufficient deterrence, it may be useful, a useful initiative, but a collective response to economic coercion could, however, represent an important risk to global economic fragmentation. The last point, outbound investment. There, the Commission is currently examining what security risk can result from outbound investment of sensitive cutting-edge technologies, risks in terms of military intelligence capabilities, but also human rights risk. And the Commission is also examining now what measures would be most appropriate to address such risks. And the 3rd of October, I think, the Commission has recommended to focus really on 4 specific technologies in this respect: biotech, quantum, AI, and advanced semiconductors. And their cooperation with South Korea and other like-minded countries could relate to the exchange of relevant information, experiences to further develop a common understanding on this issue and develop policy tools. To conclude, the European economic security strategy strikes a delicate balance between openness and protection. Cooperation with South Korea and other like-minded countries together, and this is important, together with the consistent and constant application of the principles of proportionality and precision, are essential for economic security to be a positive strategy, still a second best option at EU, bilateral and global levels. It means actually avoiding the fragmentation of the global economy, which would have important negative consequences, even more for developing than developed economies, and there is a historical responsibility here for some actors.
So actually we live in the era of industrial policy. What does that mean? So since 2017, there's an increasing number of countries have established their own industrial policies. If you look at the global trade alert data set, it just collected all the commercial intervention policies by the state government. So there are really a lot of countries really use these industrial policies for intervening their trading system. So traditionally, Western countries have been critical of these government-led policies, but now they are really the major players to working on increase their domestic manufacturing capacity and reduce external risk in supply chains and outperform their competitors in cutting-edge industries. So these are really particular trends really putting upon all of this kind of state intervening policies. This is also really crucial for reshaping our supply chain that connects developing countries to the world economy. The RISE initiative has been discussed in G7 summit and Korea, Japan, US trilateral summits, and now action plans are needed. The Korea and Europe should work together, make supply chain more inclusive. The Europe is leading with advanced regulations and hold key technologies. Korea is leading global sellers in frontier sectors. So by working together, we can lead the global value chain to become greener and healthier.
That we are entering at least a decade of security. So the decade we are entering, we are already in a framework where everything will be measured first and foremost by its functional relation to security. And it's clear that space of democracies is becoming one indivisible security space as well. Therefore, I'm going to repeat something that may sound like your usual diplomatic phrase, but it is becoming ever so more important for friends and allies to work together to promote cooperation and coordination based on our common values and agreed rules, because this is both an anchor and a pool from which we are taking the capacity and capability to address the common challenges and work together to somehow mitigate all the challenges that are coming our way. At the same time, we really need to buckle up and we need to be much quicker and much more agile in finding very concrete solutions. We have to, and this is my first firm belief, we need to reimagine and restructure our reach out to the so-called global south, to developing countries and emerging democracies. And this is where I believe we are still failing somewhat, because it's not enough to express your goodwill to do that. It's not enough to talk about it. You have to cement it with facts on the ground. I worked on connectivity strategies and what is now called Global Gateway. And one thing where I believe we are not understanding it right is that all the tools employed there are the tools of development assistance. But what we are actually doing, or what we should be doing, or what can yield results, is the logic of strategic investment. This is what our partners are asking us for. They're not asking us for development assistance as it was understood in the last century. They are asking us for a dialogue of industrial policies, if you wish. And only by understanding what is the right methodology that we need to use, we will be able to attract private capital to really invest in this at the scale that is needed, because there will be no consequences in positive sense if there is no scale that can really help build critical infrastructure in the way the needs are out there. So we have to sit down, we have to agree at what are the most functional new corridors that need to be created, what are the preconditions for the private capital to come on a larger scale and create the new value chains. I mean, there are many things that still need to be upgraded, from good governance, transparency, etc. So there is a lot of work to be done.
So, well, the problem with economic security is that it is a very large, broad concept, which encompasses a number of things, a wide array of very diverse issues, spanning from supply chain security, and this is something that people have in mind immediately, but it's not exclusively about that. It is also about protection of critical infrastructure, for instance. It is also about the availability of and access to materials, key technologies. So it's about a number of very different things that makes it particularly complicated to discuss economic security. Okay, well, now let's bring Korea in, through the partnership, of course. And I think that what we can say is that there are converging concerns on the part of the EU and Korea. And the convergence is very much due to the fact that the two partners have been victims of weaponization, of economic weaponization. And this has been mentioned in the previous session. I understand that in Korea there is before THAAD and after THAAD. Okay, so two major, well, it is really a watershed moment. There's two various periods. Well, it may not be as harsh in the case of the EU, but I guess we may argue that there is a before Lithuania and after Lithuania moment in the EU. There has been also this episode of very intense weaponization of interdependence by China, exerting pressure on Lithuania. So for these reasons, we have converging views on the part of the EU and the part of Korea on what economic security is all about and what weaponization of interdependencies may mean. So Korea is an ideal partner for the EU for a number of reasons. The first reason, and this goes back to what has been said earlier, this is due to the fact that EU and Korea are very close partners. There are very tight relations between the two economies. So this is very positive situation to develop further ties. Second thing is that there are already mechanisms in place for the two parties to discuss together. Of course, we have the free trade agreements, but we have also other new instruments, and in particular the digital partnership, which has been signed recently, and which provides a strong basis for enhancing resilience in the two sides. So we already have a couple of mechanisms in place. We can develop further mechanisms, other mechanisms, but the two parties are in very good position to work together on that.